Hey there nation, and welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate, and we're back with the episode of Commander Cheapskate Gamer Reviews, the series where we review various products related to the wargaming hobby. And on today's episode, we're taking at Tribes of the Wasteland, the latest supplement to Games Workshop's Necromunda, and this supplement is exclusive to Ashwaste Nomad gangs. In this video, we will go over the rule changes that are available in this supplement. We'll also talk about some of the campaign role game mechanics that have also changed for Ashwaste Nomads. We'll talk about their fighters, their training posts, as well as the materials available in those training posts, as well as the brand new Warrior Spirit game mechanic that is exclusive to the Ashwaste Nomads. And because this video will be more of a deeper dive, I will put timestamps in the description box down below, so that way you can click and navigate to the part of the video that interests you the most. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about the Ashwaste Nomads and how they've improved with this new supplement. Now, it's important that I tell you right off the bat, if you are looking for new Arthurite rules in lieu of vehicles for the Ashwaste Nomads, I'm just going to be honest with you guys, it's not available in this supplement. I was really downhearted by that fact. I was really looking forward to seeing if they actually had access to giant Arthurites to take the place of light vehicles and medium vehicles and heavy vehicles and so forth. Unfortunately, that is not available for them, so that part is kind of sad. Now, with that being said, there are some changes that have been made to this supplement and to Ashwaste Nomads where they don't necessarily need those Arthurite rules anymore, and I'll talk about exactly why that is the case in this video later on. So if you're looking for that rule, it's not here, which is kind of tragic. But that's okay though, because like I said before, there's some significant changes made to the Ashwaste Nomads where they don't really need them anymore, and that's kind of added to a benefit on that one. So with that being said, let's go on and talk about the rest of the review. So up first, most of the rules from the Book of the Outlands have remained the same for Ashwaste Nomads. They have tweaked a little bit through the rules. For example, Ash Cloaks now have been changed just quite a little bit. In the original Book of the Outlands, Ashwaste Cloaks gave you a 5-up ward save against environmental effects and also gave you respirators. That way you can survive the environmental effects of the Ash Waste that have actually changed in this edition. In this book, the Ash Cloaks now give you a 4+ ward save. So now you have an even better ward save against environmental effects, which is quite nice. It gives you a 50-50 chance of surviving whatever comes your way, and you still have access to those respirator rules as well. Now, there's also some significant changes made for these gangs in the Dominion campaign. So in the Dominion campaign, instead of having a gang settlement like everybody else has, you actually have what's called the Nomad Outpost. And the Nomad Outpost gives you 2d6 times 10 credits at the end of every single week, so that way you can use the money to kind of generate credits for yourself. At the same time, it can never be lost to you. You always have it for the remainder of the campaign, and if you ever get challenged on that piece of territory, you get home turf advantage. And it kind of operates the same way how Paladin Enforcers operate when they get attacked at their precinct house. It's taking place on a Zone Mortalis tabletop. You can make the terrain any way that you want to and design it any way that you want to because you are defending it. Your opponents are fighting you on that terrain piece, and you also have home turf advantage as well. And it's a purpose of the fact because, it's your home and you're kind of defending it, so your enemies are at a disadvantage. Now, obviously, if your opponents win, they get 5+ to their reputation to defeat you on your home turf, so you do have to worry about that as well. At the same time, we also have another game mechanic for Dominion campaigns called the Raid Territory game mechanic. So whenever you're in the challenging phase and you get a new territory for yourself, you don't actually receive any boons from that territory. Instead, you get what's called the Raid Territory benefit, which means you gain 4d6 times 10 credits as a one-time reward. It's supposed to represent the fact that your nomads are running through and destroying everything and stealing everything that's of value and destroying everything else. And when you get done with it, you get your 46 times 10 credits, and then it becomes old ruins, and it doesn't do anything to help you out. And with that takes us to our very first Balance Bandwagon trigger warning for this video. As I already say this, I can imagine a bunch of Balance Bandwagon people freaking out over this, pulling their own hair and screaming, "Oh my god, Nomads could potentially earn 6d6 times 10 credits in a game?" Yes, they can potentially do so. Now, there are some things I want you to consider when it comes to this, of course. The Raid Territory can only be done one time per territory, and as you guys are fully aware, there's only so many territories you can take in a Dominion campaign, so that's one thing you have to worry about. And the second thing as well, they don't have access to the regular trading posts or the black market anymore. So Ashwaste Nomads have their own exclusive trading posts that they can only shop from, and there's not very much things there, and the things they do have are quite expensive. Not to mention Ashwaste Nomads themselves are quite expensive as well, so that's how it kind of balances itself out. So for all you balanced bandwagon people who are freaking out or the potential amount of credits these guys can take, relax and just get better at the game. So that being said, let's talk about their fighters. So once again, Chieftains, Watchers, Stormcallers, Dust Runners, as well as Dust Riders, they all make a comeback to this edition of the Tribes of the Wasteland rules. You can still have access to those guys. At the same time now, Dustback Helamites, you can now purchase them for your Chieftains, for your Watchers, for your Warriors, as well as for your Dust Runners, as well as for your Sha'dar Hunters. The Helamite now costs 60 credits, and they count as vehicles to give you the mounted condition as well. So while we don't get the access to giant Arthurmites, that part is kind of sad. But the cool part, though, is that Dustback Helamites do come with a close combat attack now. All of them do. You get additional attack at Strength 3 at -1 AP, and you still get the Mighty Leap skill as well. Which takes us to our second balanced bandwagon trigger warning of this video. A lot of balanced bandwagon guys are going to freak out. Wait a minute, everybody gets an attack now with their Helamites? Oh my god. Well, don't forget, they're also spending 60 credits to get that ability. Not to mention, you don't have access, the Ashwaste Nomads don't have access to larger insects that they can use to ride upon to mount heavier weapons on, so chill out, alright? At the same time, though, this also means that your Dust Riders are more important more than ever now in a gang, because those Dust Riders only cost 80 credits. They have the Fighter, as well as the Dustback Helamite as well, so you're going to still want to default with as many Dust Runners as possible, and you kind of want to save your money for those Dustback Helamites for your other fighters as well. So that's pretty much the trade-off. So balance, bandwagoneers, relax, it's not that big a deal. And continuing on with our fighters, we have the brand new fighter that was released with the Ashwaste Nomad preview that was opened earlier this year with the Sha'dar Hunter. So the Sha'dar Hunter takes the space of the new specialist classification fighter that is now available for gangs. They do count as Gang Fighter X rules, so you can use these guys as normal fighters. They are specialists, so they can also choose their own advancements as they level up. They cost 65 credits per fighter, and they have pretty much the same stats as normal Nomad Warriors, except they have one additional attack in close combat. And they also have access to the brand new Wasteland Ambusher special rule, which means that you can deploy anywhere on the battlefield 9 inches away from the enemies. Now, here's the difference between Wasteland Ambushers as well as Infiltrate. With Infiltrate, you have to use Infiltrate at the very beginning of the battle. For the Wasteland Ambushers rule, though, you can deploy these guys in any end phase of the game. So if you want to deploy these guys in the end phase of round 3, you can do so. Round 2, do so. The very last round of the game, you can do so. And it gives you these guys a very powerful ability, because then you can put these guys in really critical moments of the battle to kind of help you out and to achieve whatever objective you're trying to achieve as well. It's an extremely powerful ability for these guys. Now, when it comes to their weapon choices, they can only take close combat weapons at the very beginning of gang creation. That's the only type of weapons they can take. Now, they can take certain ranged weapons. The only ranged weapons they can take are pistols, but these pistols can only come from the Ashwaste Nomad training post, so they're kind of limited in the kind of pistols they can also take as well. At the same time, their skill access is not really that great. From the way that they look, you would assume that combat would be their big thing, but oddly enough, combat is a secondary skill. So is the Wasteland skill. That's also another secondary skill. Their primary skill is Cunning, which is kind of wasted on these guys, and the reason why is because they don't need to take Infiltrate, because they already have a version of that, a better version of it, but they can infiltrate in. Also, they don't have a lot of shooting attacks, so Overwatch is kind of wasted on these guys as well. Evade is kind of nice because you get that -1 hit against these guys, which is going to be quite helpful. Same thing with Escape Artists, in case you get engaged in combat you want to escape from. That's really about it, so it's not really going to help out these guys all that much. Now, when it comes to their close combat weapons, let's go and talk about that. So the Sha'dar Hunters have their own exclusive close combat weapons. The only problem is that even though the fighters are great and the things that they can do are really awesome as well, their weapons are kind of lackluster, and we'll explain why that's the case here in a second. So first of all, they have the Kite and Dagger. The Kite and Dagger costs 15 credits, and it's very similar to a fighting knife. They gain rending weapons trait, but they lose the -1 AP, which is not that great. But, you know, it's 15 credits, and you get a basic weapon for your fighters. Up next is the Bone Talon. They get 20 credits in order to get that weapon. They do have the -1 AP like a normal fighting knife. However, though, they don't get backstab, which is also kind of a trade-off for that part. So that part is not so great for these characters. Now, that's the thing that's kind of upsetting about that. Now they do have the Instinctive Knife, which costs 20 credits, and it acts just exactly like a fighting knife. However, they have Kim delivery on this. And in my opinion, the Instinctive Knife is actually quite good for 20 credits because you can deliver enemy Kims. And I'll explain why that's the case later on in this video when we talk about Kims that are exclusive to the Ashwaste Nomads. After that, we have the Chitin Gauntlet, which costs 25 credits, which is actually quite good for these characters as well. The 25 credits gives you an additional +1 attack in close combat, which is kind of nice as well. So that's one good benefit of having that weapon available to your fighters. So that part is quite nice. At the same time, you also have -1 AP as well as 1 damage, and they also have the Pulverized weapon trait attached to it again. So that's also kind of cool too. Then you might argue that the Nomad Stalking Knife and the Long Blade might be better weapons because they have parry and things like that, but not bad all things considered. Up next is the Trident, which is going to cost you 30 credits. It's also got gives you a versatile attack on that one with +1 strength, which is also quite good. It also gives you -1 AP. It also has the shock characteristic, weapons trait attached to it as well. The only problem though, it is unwieldy, so that part is kind of rough, and you do -1 to hit when you're in base-to-base contact with the enemies, so that part's kind of nice. However though, that versatile trait kind of gives it a really powerful ability because you move 6 inches plus D3 plus that 2+ versatile range. You could be able to reach out and hit somebody with it, which is quite nice. And then of course we have the Venom Whip. In my opinion, the Venom Whip is the best weapon in this game for the Sha'dar Hunters. That costs 30 credits for those guys. Revolve of strength 4, damage is equal to whatever the target's remaining wounds are, which is quite nice. And it's also versatile, which is also nice as well. And then of course we have the Venom Staff, which costs 35 credits. You get -1 AP and Pulverize, which is okay, but you also get Toxin on that as well, which is quite nice. It's a nice little bonus to that. At the same time, you also have the Venom Sac, which is available to these guys. Now, the Venom Sac acts just like Kimsith in that it helps you wound your enemies better with toxin traits by manipulating the toughness characteristic for your opponents. However, it's more expensive than Kimsith. Kimsith can only cost 15 credits, now, and the Venom Sacs cost 35. Now, there's a real legitimate reason why that's the case, and the reason why is because for Kimsith, you have to pass an intelligence check in order to get that ability off, and that's why it only costs 15 credits, because most fighters have horrible intelligence characteristics. For an Ashwaste Nomad, though, all they gotta do is pass an initiative test, because what they're supposed to be doing, narratively speaking, is that they throw one of these things at you and coat you in that venom, and then they stab you with a weapon, so that way that blood enters your bloodstream, that venom enters your bloodstream, and that's how it's supposed to work. So that's why it costs more, about 35 credits, and the reason why is because it's gonna be easier for you to get that -1 to their toughness characteristic to take them out of action with venom. And that's the reason why you want that, alright? Now, it costs 35 credits, so it is kind of expensive. So that's the thing you have to keep in mind. And of course, that takes us to our next Balance Bandwagon trigger warning. So as you can probably imagine, people are going to scream their minds off. I can hear the death screams of Balance Bandwagoneers as we're going over this video. Yes, they have all these things they can do. But you know what? The Sha'dar Hunters, their close combat weapons are actually not all that overpowered or all that over the top. They're actually quite fair in my opinion, considering what a Sha'dar Hunter can do with that Wasteland Ambush special rule as well. And yes, you might be thinking, oh my god, they can give me additional -1 to my toughness with that initiative check of there. That's true, but these weapons are quite expensive. So are the Toxin Sacs, so are the Sha'dar Hunters. You're not going to be able to take many of these guys. You might be able to take one of these guys at game creation. So that's the thing you gotta remember about these guys. They're quite expensive to recruit. So Balance Bandwagoneers, chill out, drink some milk, cool off. It's not that big of a deal. Alright, so let's talk about exotic beasts now. So we have 3 types of exotic beasts that are available to the Ashwaste Nomads. First of all, we have our Unbound Helamites, which is actually kind of great. These are like wild ponies, if you will, from Native American tribes. So I can imagine like you'd have a tribe of Ashwaste Nomads and a bunch of Helamites that are not ridden upon. That's what your Unbound Helamite is, alright? Now, you get to leaders, champions, as well as Dust Riders can access these exotic beasts. They can take anywhere between 0 to 2 of these guys. They cost 30 credits a piece as well. And the reason why you take an Unbound Helamite is because if your mounted fighter is being shot at, you can transfer the pinning shot to an Unbound Helamite instead. So it's one of those kind of exotic beasts where you can transfer hits. All you gotta do is pass an initiative test. And since Ashwaste Nomads have pretty decent initiative tests, you'll be doing that quite a bit. So a really great exotic beast for mounted fighters. Then we have a new one called the Ashwing Helamite. These are the flying Helamites that they were talking about in the Warhammer previews. These can be taken by leaders and champions. At the same time, these Helamites have a 9-inch movement allowance with flying, so they can ignore terrain. And they also have a single toxic attack, which is quite nice for these guys as well. But the really cool thing about Ashwing Helamites is that they have a new game mechanic called the Lure Rule, all right, which is kind of nice. It takes a basic action to use this, and what ends up happening is that the Ashwing Helamites handler basically takes a lure and they place it anywhere on the battlefield. It kind of acts like a loot castle. You kind of put it down, and all of the Ashwing Helamites can stay within 9 inches of that lure and kind of patrol around. Now, why would you want to use this? The reason why you want to use it is because you could use the lure rule in order to protect an objective, for example. So let's say, for example, you got to protect a gang relic and you want to be protected. Well, just drop your Ashwing Helamite lure right there on the gang relic, and these things will patrol within 9 inches of it, attack anything that goes near it, which is kind of great. Or if you want to lock down a flank or an access point, or whatever the case you want to use it for, it's a great way for you to do that as well. So the Ashwing Helamites, very much worth their costs and credits. And then, of course, you have the brand new Arthurmite Spire Worms. These are the ones that are available for the Sha'dar Hunters. Sha'dar Hunter fighters can take up to 2 of these guys. They cost 45 credits apiece. They're not all that great with weapon skill 4. They have a strength 3 attack with rending with only 1 wound as well, so that part's not so great. But the Spire Worm is -1 hit against because it is a small target, which is quite nice, and they can burrow through difficult terrain, kind of like Millosaurs. So that's the nice thing about that. It kind of gives you a supporting attack for your Sha'dar Hunters. And these are the new exotic beasts that are available for your gangs. Up next, talk about the Wasteland Skills. The Wasteland Skills are pretty much the same as they were from the Book of the Outlands, with a few changes. First of all, Ghosts of the Waste have actually changed a bit. Originally, when you used your Sky Mantle High, it used to be a double action, but now with the Ghosts of the Waste skill, it's a basic action instead, which is quite nice. So if you wanted to, you could snipe real quick with your fighter with this skill, and then take another basic action to hide. Which is kind of nice. It goes in that whole like hit and run, as well as striking from stealth type of situation for your characters. So really cool ability to have. Another one, of course, is Beast Handler. Beast Handler has changed because now anybody with a Dustback Helamite gets that attack now. So what the Beast Handler skill does instead, it gives you additional Helamite attacks. So instead of just 1 attack, you get 2 of those as well. And of course, in my humble opinion, the Bring It Down skill is still the best skill from the Wasteland skill tree, but you know, that's just my overall opinion about the skill so far. Now, one of the most significant changes that have occurred for Ash Waste Nomads is now that Ash Waste Nomads have the option to take only equipment from the Nomad trading post. So Nomads have their own exclusive trading post that they themselves can only use. They can't use the common trading post that all the other gangs use. They can't use the black market. The only thing they can use is this Nomad trading post. On the flip side, your opponents can't take anything else from the Nomad trading post. They can only take their materials from the normal trading post as usual. So that part is kind of, you know, there's some positives and negatives for that, but we'll mainly focus on the positives on this one, all right? So first of all, a lot of the materials from Book of the Outlands are still in this Nomad trading post, which is quite nice. You do have the scavenge game mechanics with the guns, so this time they've kind of increased that a little bit. You have scavenge shotguns now you can take, same thing with auto pistols, shotguns, las guns, as well as las pistols, so that's kind of nice. No longer just relying upon scavenged auto guns and scavenged stub guns. And at the same time, though, you have some equipment that will give you the brand new Haywire trait that's available for some of your weapons. Now let's talk about Haywire. The problem with a lot of Ash Waste Nomad gangs is that they had a really hard time fighting gangs that had vehicles, right? If your enemy had like a Ridge Hauler, for example, it was a nightmare trying to stop that Ridge Hauler because you didn't really have access to a lot of high strength weapons. Your weapons did have the shock trait, which is nice, which means you can automatically wound at a 6-up, but you know, it's only 1 in 6 chance of that happening. The Haywire trait fixes that. What the Haywire trait does, it allows you to wound all vehicles. No matter what kind of vehicle it is, you can wound all vehicles on a 4-up, all right? Very powerful ability. So now you're really wounding vehicles now with some of the weapons that you have at your disposal, all right? Now, against other opponents, like people who are not mounted fighters or fighters are on foot, it has no additional effect. But for vehicles, though, it gives you a 4-up on the wound on that one. At the same time, you can add this to your blast weapons, as well as some bombs and some traps that you have as well. And oddly enough, the scavenge shotgun, which is kind of weird. But that's where you can actually do that. You can now wound enemy vehicles on a 4-up. And as I took a moment to go to this clip, I could hear the dying death screams of Balance bandwagoners across the ether. And they're probably crying hot, hateful tears of balance, balance, balance. So let's talk about why. Yes, Ash Waste Nomads do get the Haywire trait. It's not available to all their weapons, only available on some of the weapons, and it only triggers on enemy vehicles. So that's right, ladies and gentlemen. Enemy vehicles are no longer safe from your Ash Waste Nomads. So if you own vehicles and you spent the last 2 years laughing hysterically as you're running over Ash Waste Warriors with your vehicles, like, oh, the Ash Waste Nomads can't do anything about it. Well, now the tribal people are dangerous now. Act accordingly, because now they got a 50-50 chance of ruining your vehicles. Now, there is a trade-off for this, of course. Ash Waste Nomads don't have access to vehicles of their own. They don't have access to a lot of the same heavy weapons that other gangs have. And this Haywire trait only applies to vehicles only. So if you don't have vehicles, you got nothing to worry about. If you do have vehicles, well, play like it matters and you won't have to worry about it, all right? It's just that simple. Now, there are some cool things available in the training post. For example, things like treatment pouches. They pretty much mimics the same abilities of what a rogue doc does with medical escort missions, and that only costs 50 credits in order to get those, which is quite good. The electrostatic generator, that is the ability, that's the weapon attachment that gives your weapons the Haywire trait. It costs 25 credits to purchase this. You can get it for shotguns, blast rifles, blast carbines, as well as heavy blasters. They add that Haywire trait to your gang, so that part is kind of nice. So it's not like it automatically comes with your weapons now. You have to buy this. It costs 25 credits to do so. So it's not like something that you can just spam really easily in your gangs. At the same time, one of the more interesting weapons available is called the Electrostatic Impulse Emitter. It costs 70 credits. You can only use it once per battle. And what it does, it creates a 12-inch radius attack that targets all enemy vehicles within 12 inches. What this attack has, of course, has Haywire with -1 AP and 2 damage. And after it gets done, the enemy vehicles become stationary and stalled. So it's kind of like an EMP pulse that goes off that also causes damage to your enemy vehicles. And of course, right now as I'm saying this, you can hear the screaming of hateful screaming of balanced bandwagoners as I'm talking about this. Now, there is a trade-off, however. You still don't have any access to grenades, so you have no grenade access whatsoever. And I think it's supposed to represent the fact that grenades are kind of hard to come by in the Underhive, even though everyone has them. But in the Ash Waste, though, not so much. So you don't have access to grenades. But that's okay, though, because you have access to better things that can really mess up vehicles. Alright, so let's talk about chems real quick. So yes, the Ash Waste Nomads actually have their own versions of chems that they can purchase exclusively for themselves for the Ash Waste Training Post. Now the first one's called Milk of the Harpy. Now this one is kind of interesting. In exchange for taking this product, you actually gain +2 to your movement characteristics, as well as +1 attack for 45 credits. Now this seems like it's a really good buff to have, but there is some drawbacks to this. If you don't move within at least 5 inches in your activation, you do suffer a flesh wound, so that is a negative for that. Now you might be thinking, well, okay, that's not so bad. I mean, Ash Waste Nomads are pretty quick, but the problem though is, what if you get stuck in a protracted combat? That means you're losing flesh wounds every single time you're not moving around, so that is something that could be bad for your gang. Another really interesting chem is Ash Orchid Venom. Now what this does, it actually limits your activations to once per activation unless a willpower is tested for each of your activations. Now you might be thinking, why the heck would I only limit myself to 1 action per activation unless I pass a willpower test? Well, the reason why is because you can remove a flesh wound at the end of your activation, whether you pass that willpower test or not, which is kind of nice. Now you could shake off the effects of Ash Orchid Venom by actually taking a toughness test where you actually have to pass a 10+ test by taking 2d6 and rolling your toughness to pass it. So that may seem kind of doable, but the thing is though, you're still only doing 1 action per turn, and it's nice eliminating the flesh wounds, but that's really about it. I don't necessarily think it's meant for a buff for you so much as it's a handicap for your enemy. Up next, you have another ability called Tears of the Storm. What that does, it lets you actually take a 3rd action per activation, which sounds really good as well. The problem though is that when you take this stuff though, it makes you insane. So that part is not so great, which could be pretty bad, giving yourself insanity, which is never a good thing to do in the first place. Now you could of course shake off the effects of this by passing a 11+ test by rolling 2d6 and add your toughness. That part is kind of nice, but that means that you only can take a single action per activation for the rest of the battle. So you might be thinking, well, why the heck would I take this stuff? And that's because it's not really meant to be taken by your own warriors. It's meant to put in your enemy warriors, because giving your enemies insanity is all kinds of fun. The last one is Duststalker's Mana Book. Only costs 25 credits for this one, which is kind of nice, but it lets you completely ignore the visibility rule, which just sounds like a really good idea on the tabletop. You might be thinking, well, this is great. No more infrasights and photo goggles necessary. I don't need to worry about visibility. Now, there's a drawback for this, of course. The drawback is two things. First, you automatically fail a test against flash weapons, so that is kind of a bad thing. So if you go against a flash trait weapon, you automatically fail that one. You'll lose your activation because of it. At the same time, your attacks will become reckless as well. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, Commander Cheapskate, what's the point of taking any of these Chems if they don't really supply me with all that great of buff? Well, here's why you want it. The reason why is because these Chems are actually not meant to really buff you, in my opinion, alright? What they're really meant to do is handicap your enemy. What you do is you attack your enemy with these Chems to cause these problems for themselves. Now, why would that be great? The reason why is because of the addiction rules, alright? If your opponent becomes addicted to these Chems, they can't buy these Chems. Alright, these Chems are only exclusive to Ash Waste Nomad fighters. So if you really want to troll your enemies for the entirety of a campaign, hit them with one of these Chems with the drawbacks that you think is the best to cause a lot of havoc for your enemies. And if they get addicted to this stuff, guess what? That's it. They are done. They are stuck with that addiction for the rest of the campaign because they can't buy these from the trading posts. Now, if you really want to be kind of ruthless, and I would commend you for doing this, if you want to be really ruthless on this, what you could do, of course, is you could sell your Chems, doses of your Chems from the Nomad trading post, and then sell them like a real-life drug dealer to your opponents and make them put them on their fighters to alleviate their addiction rules. You can make more credits this way, or you could really troll them and want things in exchange like territories or equipment, or the case you want. It's really, really awesome game mechanic. I think it's a great way to really troll your enemies during a campaign. Now, you might lose some friends over this if you do this, but, you know, just the ability to do this would be hilarious to see what happens to your enemies. Alright, so let's move on to hanger-ons, brutes, and hired guns. So once again, the Arthurite Dune Scuttler and the Herder are still around from the Book of the Outlands. They just get republished in this supplement as well, and they do exactly the same thing as before. However, now you get the access to the new Nomad Outcasts. Nomad Outcasts are like typical Hive Scum, but used by Ash Waste Nomads. So if you wanted to hire Hive Scum, but you knew you were going to do so before, you can do with these guys. They cost 30 credits a piece, and they can take 60 credits with the weapons and war gear. They do have a very different weapons and war gear table they can take than other Hive Scum. One of the cool things about these guys, they can take long rifles, which is really fun, so you can do that for your scum as well. At the same time, we have access to the Nomad Harrier, which is basically like your typical version of a bounty hunter for nomads. However, though, a little bit different game mechanic for these guys. You don't get the bounty from capturing fighters. The Harrier only gets the bounty if you wreck enemy vehicles. So every single time you wreck an enemy vehicle on the tabletop, which will be quite easy for you to do these days, you have to roll a d6. On a 3 up, you get additional d6 times 10 credits for every vehicle that you manage to wreck. So that's how the Harrier operates. At the same time, you also have access to house agents now, but that's a whole other bag of tricks that we just really don't have time for to review in this video. Alright, so let's talk about Warrior Spirits. So the Warrior Spirit game mechanic is the unique game mechanic for this gang, much like how you have Articles of Faith for House Khador, or Cyber Technica for Van Sar, or Ancestry for the Ironhead Squat Prospectors. Warrior Spirits is where it's at for the Ash Waste Nomads. This is a new narrative special rule that's given to these gangs. And pretty much what ends up happening is you have 4 major, I would say, tribal nations that you could really pick from in order for your gang. So when you actually create your Ash Waste Nomad gang, you pick one of these tribal nations to be a member of, and then depending on what tribal nation you have a table where you roll a d6 for each of your leaders and your champion, and whatever you roll, you get that one spirit, and you can use that one spirit once per battle. All right, and it's very, very random, and that's basically how it works. And while I'm at this, I might as well nip this in the bud as well. Balance bandwagon guys like, oh my god, they got supernatural abilities, oh no! Okay, yes, they do, alright? But relax, balance bandwagoneers. And the reason why is because, like I said before, it's completely random. You don't get to choose which warrior spirits you get for every battle. It's completely randomized. So you can never optimize it really, because it just kind of depends on, I guess, whoever's listening to your prayers before you go to battle, and that's how it works. So every single time you decide to use it, it's going to be random every single time. So balance bandwagoneers, chill out. So like I said before, you have 4 different tribal nations. So let's go and talk about those real quick. So up first, we have the Oil Slick Nation. These guys, the Oil Slick Stalkers, are supposed to represent Ash Waste Nomads who are actually in the Inner Hive. So that part is kind of cool. These guys are supposed to be hanging around the places like the Sump, for example, or in the bad zones of Necromunda. So these guys are not exactly in the mainstream. They're like in the wastes of Necromunda as well. So it's kind of nice. So if you're looking for a reason why your Ash Waste Nomads are in the Underhive, they're because they're members of the Oil Slick Nation, the Oil Slick Stalkers. That's where they come from. Now the buffs that you get from this are primarily dealing with things like movement on the battlefield for the most part. You can give things like temporary flying for some of your fighters. They can ignore terrain and kind of slip through. That's another warrior spirit that gives you. Another warrior spirit gives you the ability to access Radphage, which is quite nice. Mutation, which is kind of neat, gives you +1 strength and +1 toughness. So those warrior spirits are quite nice. But like I said before, you really can't choose which one you get. It just kind of depends what you roll up every single time. For those of you who want to take Ash Waste Nomads to the depths of Hive Secundus and the Underhells, you can be members of the Dustwall Crawlers. These guys are basically revolving around the Hive Secundus narrative. These are guys who got stuck on the other side of the dust wall, so they're stuck in the Secundian inclusion zone. So for these guys, they actually have some pretty interesting warrior spirits. Things they can use are mainly used for for damage and close combat. Things like giving you toxin bonuses to your toxin attacks, or giving you additional attacks, additional weapon skill. It mainly focuses on causing damage in close combat and in close quarters combat. So for those of you guys who are in the Hive Secundus and you're looking for an interesting nation to pick, you can pick this one if you want to, or any nation. It's really up to you. And we have the largest nation in the Ash Waste Nomad community called the Grey Waste Stalkers. These are the guys that live out in the Ash Waste themselves. And when it comes to these characters, they pretty much have the same warrior spirits that you saw in the Apocrypha Necromunda supplement that came out earlier last year, where they actually started using this game mechanic as well. So most of those guys actually come from there. It's kind of basic, and they don't really have only that interesting powers, but I think it's because it's to represent the fact that these are the most populous of the Ash Waste Nomads. The very last tribe of the nation are called the Lead Sky Seekers. These guys are basically fly around for the most part. It's like, they can fly now? Yes, they can fly now. Which is kind of interesting for these guys. Most of their warrior spirits deal with teleportation as well as redeploying your fighters on the tabletop. So that part's kind of neat about these guys. The Blade Spirit as well as the Storm Spirit from the Apocrypha Necromunda supplement, that actually shows up here for these guys as well. And that pretty much makes up your guys' warrior spirits. So just like a little added bonus to help you stay a little bit more competitive on the tabletop. So in conclusion, I think that the Tribes of the Wasteland is an excellent new resource for those who are interested in playing Ash Waste Nomads. It's great for use for both Underhive play, as well as playing in the Underhells, as well as playing on the Ash Waste. So if you're looking for some really cool things to do with your Ash Waste Nomads, I think it makes them a lot more competitive now, especially when they're fighting against enemy vehicles as well. And I think that some of the rules that they attach with the new Underhive rules for playing in Dominion campaigns is quite nice for these guys. It makes them a little bit more competitive as well. So that's a really cool thing about that part. Now the sad part is, of course, that they have no access to new Arthurite quote-unquote vehicle rules. I was kind of sad they don't have access to that, but at the same time, though, I understand why they didn't do it. The rules that they have now with things like Haywire, for example, makes them a little bit more competitive against vehicles, so they really don't necessarily need that. Plus, you can buy Dustback Hillmites as like mounted options for your fighters if you want to. They can keep them in the stash for not using them and use them when they go out to the Ash Waste. So that's another nice thing about these guys. And of course, whenever something new does drop down from the pipe from Games Workshop, you do have to worry about the death cries and hateful screams of balanced bandwagoners everywhere. So just be aware that if you are an Ash Waste Nomad player and you decide to use this supplement to help you out, you have to face this. So that is a bit of a negative with this whole new supplement. So the question remains, should you buy it? Like I said before, it kind of depends on your situation as well as your personal budget. If you don't want to buy this book, that's perfectly fine. I mean, there's very little difference. There's some differences, but not as many from the Book of the Outlands. You can still pretty much use a lot of things in the Book of the Outlands to play your Ash Waste Nomads if you wanted to as well. If you play an Ash Waste Nomad gang and you want to get all the latest and greatest things, by all means, get it as well. If you don't play Ash Waste Nomads at all, then there's no real reason for you to get this supplement. There's nothing in here that adds or takes away from any other gang or from any other campaign at this point. It's just kind of like its own little standalone supplement for this unique group. Now, for me personally, I will buy this supplement because I do want to see what the rules are and have it for my Ash Waste Nomad gang players in my gaming group. But otherwise, though, if you don't play Ash Waste Nomads, you can completely skip it. It's really up to you. So there you guys have it. That's good to do for this video. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is valuable to us as always. That's good to do for this one. I am Commander Cheapskate. I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace out and stay classy.